Hello, welcome to Catholic Life, ordinary people with extraordinary faith. I'm Deacon Jody Moscona. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're going to have a very interesting show. I have a wonderful guest, Dr. Stephen Binz. He's one of my friends. He's been on before. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Jody. Great being with you.
So Dr. Binz is a biblical scholar, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but he leads pilgrimages, which is what my passion is, and so that's kind of why I think we'll go that way a little bit more today. So how are you?
I'm doing very well.
I'm glad you dressed down because it's summer and it's hot.
Yes, in southern Louisiana, we've got to be cash.
That is great. That is great. So, I know you just got back from a pilgrimage. Why don't we start with that? Tell us where you went and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, when I lead pilgrimages, most of the places I've already been, but there are several places on this pilgrimage where I hadn't been before, and it was really a thrill. It was a Marian pilgrimage, Marian-centered. And Father Charlie Landry went with us, which was a lot of fun. We had about 25 people, mostly about half Louisianans and the other half from around the country. And so we went to Lourdes, southern France, which is just a beautiful healing place. And then we began to go, we went to Burgos and all around northern Spain, much of which is the Camino de Santiago route.
Wow, yeah, that is
Now,
awesome.
I'm a little too old to walk it, but we did go by coach bus and stopped at a lot of the traditional places along the route of the Camino de Santiago, among which are, we went to Avila, and St. Teresa of Avila, which is a beautiful walled city, and St. Teresa is really the heart. They're the spiritual heart of that city, and so we did a lot on Carmelite spirituality and the whole tradition of St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross, and then we focused on those two, and then we went on to one of the main stops was Santiago itself, Santiago de Compostela, and that was just a thrill because all of the walkers that we had seen along the way, the backpackers with their shell, taking that very ancient traditional pilgrimage route, were all on their last day gathered there at the beautiful cathedral church there in Santiago.
That is awesome.
So that was that's really gave us a spirit of what pilgrimage is all about.
Right. And we did talk before we went in there, the difference between a tour and a pilgrimage.
Well, a tour and a pilgrimage are very different. I've not only do I give pilgrimages, but I've started to do a lot of speaking and writing on pilgrimage, to be sort of a specialist in that field because, for example, this summer I'm doing a 5-day Bible Institute on pilgrimage.
Oh, wow.
It's a biblical institute. I'm calling it Sacred Texts and Sacred Places. So integrating the whole biblical tradition of pilgrimage into these wonderful experiences that I lead and that people are welcome to join me on.
Right. So I know I mentioned this before, but I'll just share. I've been to the Holy Land, but I was in the Navy. It was young, and I didn't have the formation that I have now. It would be totally different to go now. That's why it's one of the things I really want to do.
Yeah, God leads us. I think that's a real distinctive aspect of pilgrimage because God calls us to pilgrimage. God sets up the circumstances in our life so that we're ready for pilgrimage.
Right.
And that's a great thing. I always help people to prepare for pilgrimage. Think about their intentions, think about their reasons for being here and how God led them here through all sorts of different ways because God works deeply in our heart on a pilgrimage because that's the main difference. A tour is a physical trip.
Right.
For relaxation, for seeing sights, for doing photography, all those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. A pilgrimage is all of those things plus the interior travel,
right?
And that's what makes a pilgrimage so unique because I always try to help people to get in touch with what's happening on the inside, the interior pilgrimage that parallels the exterior bodily pilgrimage.
Yeah. So one of the things, don't get me wrong, when I was at the Holy Land, I knew where I was.
Sure.
I grew up Catholic school. I mean, I knew, and when we went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I was awed for the right reasons, not because it was magnificent, but because of where we were. Yeah. What I think the difference is, by not having a pilgrim leader to draw us into the experience, that's what was missing. Mm-hmm. So even though I knew where I was, I just didn't know what to do about it, and I didn't have anybody to tell me. Yeah. So that's what you do.
That's what's so critical about going with a group, particularly the Holy Land, but a lot of other places as well. You can do so much more. I find when I travel by myself, I spend, or just my wife and I, for example, renting a car or something, we spend so much time trying to figure out where we are, where we need to be, and all of those logistical details. But with a group and a guide, all that's planned out for us, and we just go to all the sites and accomplish so much every day, and it makes the trip financially much more worthwhile as well. Right. So that's the kind of thing I do. I do it with a travel agency, Select International Tours, which specializes in Catholic pilgrimage.
And that's important.
That's very important. Right. And so we get Catholic guides, local guides, and we go to all the places that would be important for people of faith. And that's a wonderful thing about pilgrimage, to go with a group. And when we bond together on pilgrimage too, you make some lifelong friends because you've had that deep spiritual experience together.
Right, you've experienced it with someone, and then you share it with them, and then you can continue to share it with them.
Absolutely.
For the rest of your life, hopefully. Mm-hmm. So that's awesome. So the Holy Land is a unique place. I remember when I was doing radio, and we had Steve Ray on all the time, and he would always say, well, this time we're going, and he's all bubbly, and he'll say, now, what we do is we give everybody a rosary, and when we get to the place, we put it there. Now they have a relic. Mm-hmm. That's something the Protestants miss. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When they go, they don't experience that part of it, and you can't take it with you and create a memorial for yourself that is functional to recreate the spiritual experience on an ongoing basis, daily. Yeah. Say your rosary daily with a relic, and you can think about where you were.
Yeah, the whole idea, the whole tradition of relics is really a beautiful thing. It's part of our incarnational faith. We're a bodily faith. We touch things. The ancient spiritual master said, the more of our senses you can involve in your spiritual practice, the better. Right. So we see and we hear and we touch and and feel the textures of when we travel. And relics fall within that tradition. Even in the Old Testament, Second Kings, there's the bones of the prophet have the healing power. Right. And even the handkerchiefs, that touched Paul, have healing powers. Right. And so God works through these, what we call sacramentals, and relics are a very important part of that. And so relics and the grace that we experience through relics is a very important part of our pilgrimage as well.
And so sometimes it can even happen for you when you're not aware of it. I'll give you an example. When the relic of John Paul II was at Holy Rosary Church at Santa Maria, I went, and I really was just going. I knew I was supposed to go, Sure. Perfunctorily, you just know where you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. But actually, I was being called. I didn't know that. And when I got there and I waited my turn, I got to the front and had a physical, literally started shaking. The little sister that was there, Deacon, can I do something for you? Holding you, And it was a realization that I had a relationship with the Pope for many years that I didn't even understand till that moment. And now it's caused me to go back and recreate my experience of John Paul II through all these years. He was Pope for most of my life.
Sure, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's a very personal thing, this relationship that we have with living people and also those who have gone beyond. Right. The communion of saints is a very, very personal and intimate thing for us as Catholics. I have a rosary that Pope John Paul II gave to me when I was a student in Rome. And so it's a beautiful white, it's gold with white beads, and And I take it with me, particularly on pilgrimage. When I went to Poland, I brought a group to Poland a few years ago, and we traveled in the footsteps of St. Faustina and St. John Paul II particularly,
Right.
and we prayed the rosary on the bus. And I passed that third-class relic, now
Right.
that he's a saint, around the bus, and it was a wonderful experience. And also when we went to Fatima after we went to Santiago de Compostela, our last stop was Fatima, to end our Marian pilgrimage, and we prayed with that rosary that was so important for John Paul, his relationship to Fatima,
Right.
Our Lady of the Rosary there.
That is just phenomenal, and that's one of the tangible yet intangible parts of a pilgrimage. There's something you have, but it isn't the thing. It's the intangible reality that we get from it.
That's right.
The experiential part of it.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of times, this is a little maybe off, and we're going to take a break in just a minute. One of the things that I preached on recently was the supernatural part of our faith. Mm-hmm. People just forget that, yes, Christ is present in the Eucharist, but it's not a natural thing that he is, it's a supernatural thing.
Yes.
And we have to grab hold of the supernatural, and where we get that is through the spiritual dimension, and that's what you touch in your pilgrimages. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In such a profound way. So,
that's a sacramental faith. It's it's a wonderful thing because it touches us personally, as you said, and that experience of being touched by things. What Protestants don't understand is that we don't take these sacramentals in a magical sense.
Right.
They don't automatically, through just the object itself, give us grace. But no, it's through the faith that is enriched through that faith object or that sacramental, like a relic or a rosary or even the 7 sacraments. It's only when we approach them in faith that we gain, that we are transformed by them and grow more deeply in Christ.
Absolutely. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll tell everybody how they can go on your pilgrimages and do a little promotional part, and then we'll get into some of the biblical aspects of the pilgrimages. I know stuff that touch your heart in a deeply profound way.
Wonderful.
So we'll come back. Stay with us. We're going to take a short break. On the other side of the break, we'll be back with Dr. Binz as we talk about the biblical aspects of pilgrimage and how you can experience this for yourself. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I'm Renee Richard, host of Roots of Faith. Our new series, Exploring Our Parishes, will do exactly that. These shows will allow you to meet the devoted and dynamic leaders of the faithful in the Diocese of Baton Rouge. Journey with us as we explore our parishes.
Welcome back to Catholic Life, ordinary people with extraordinary faith. Today I'm just blessed to be with Dr. Stephen Binz, one of my friends who is a biblical scholar and also leads pilgrimages, and welcome back.
Thank you.
During the break, we were talking about you have some upcoming pilgrimages we can talk about. Why don't we let the people know what's coming up and how they can have an opportunity to maybe join you?
Yeah, well, I'm always planning new pilgrimages. I do the Holy Land about every couple of years, so that'll be coming up as well. My website is bridge-b.com, and I've got a pilgrimage page which gives all the pilgrimages that are coming up.
And we'll put that on.
The one that I'm really excited about is a brand new pilgrimage, and I've never been to these places. Mary Magdalene is one of my favorite biblical people. And I've been to Magdala in the Holy Land, and certainly Jerusalem, where Mary of Magdala experienced the risen Christ. But then there's this early tradition that Mary Magdalene, after the death of Christ and his resurrection, about a decade after, during the persecution of the Christians in Jerusalem, left and sailed to southern France, Provence. And there's this rich, wonderful tradition that she evangelized southern France, and that was the earliest part of France that was Christian, and that she spent the last part of her life in a cave, the Holy Cave, where Mary Magdalene spent the last couple of decades of her life, and where she died. We're going to be at a hotel, a converted monastery, right next to the Basilica of Mary Magdalene, where she was buried.
Wow.
We'll be in the same hotel for 10 days and take excursions to the whole region of southern France, Provence. So it's a pilgrimage in the footsteps of Mary Magdalene. I just can't wait for that. One of the key things is that we're going to be there on the Feast of Mary Magdalene, July 22nd. So it's July 22nd next year, 2020. And so we have about a year or so to get ready and sign up for that, but it's going to be a wonderful experience. The one before that, unfortunately, just sold out.
Oh,
so,
wow, okay.
We have about 35 people going to Oberammergau in Germany. Oberammergau is the Passion Play that's held only every 10 years. A little German village of wood carvers during the Middle Ages. They traveled around selling their wares throughout Europe, and they brought back the plague. And they prayed that if God would save their village from the plague, that every 10 years they would do this Passion Play. And ever since, you know, for centuries and centuries, they've been doing this Passion Play. And for the last century or so, it's just been a really big international event. Only every 10 years. So I think about what I'm going to be like in 10 years. I'm thinking, I better go now. So this is it's a wonderful thing. As I said, it's sold out. There are other people offering them as well.
Right.
But Oberammergau is a thrill. We'll go to southern Germany and Switzerland and Austria and that whole region of
the
Europe.
hills are alive.
They are
with
alive.
The sound of music.
We will indeed take a Sound of Music tour.
Amen. Amen. That is awesome. Yeah. That's great. You know, one of the things that that came to my mind when you were talking is intentional preparation for a pilgrimage. Let's say, like you just said, you're preparing for July of 2020.
That's right.
And if somebody were to say right now that I want to go in July 2020, you have a whole year to save. So let's say you need $5,000 or whatever. You have a whole year to save. You could put the money away and be able to afford it. So many people think, oh, I can never afford to go to the Holy Land, or I can never afford to do this, or I can never afford to do that. It takes intentional preparation. And oftentimes in our faith, we don't do that in a lot of areas, much less something that can be so much a part of our spiritual development.
That's right.
Long term.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is. It's a pilgrimage is traditionally a sacrifice. You know,
yeah, right.
we don't travel by ship and stay in hostels and that sort of thing like pilgrims in centuries past, but it is a sacrifice. You know, we fly over and we stay in nice places and eat good food, but it's expensive. It takes, as you say, preparation and savings and all of that. But it can be an experience that you will savor for the rest of your life.
Right.
You know, I like to say I'd much rather have a passport full of stamps than a house full of stuff.
Yes.
You know,
Amen.
we spend so much time and
think I'll
energy.
steal that. That's
and
a great
expenses
idea.
on stuff.
I love that idea.
But pilgrimage is intangible,
Right.
but it's in the memory, it's in the spiritual formation and the grace that we receive. It's the transformation that we receive, all intangible things, but lifelong treasures.
Absolutely. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of the Holy Land pilgrimages, and let's talk about the biblical roots of it, and tell me a little bit about your perspective on going to the Holy Land and why it's so important.
Yeah. Holy Land is the number one place, I think. Like I say, I offer that every couple of years, so there'll be another one coming up in 2021 to the Holy Land. I'm also writing a pilgrimage guide for Liturgical Press. I'm writing a guide that'll be out in about another year and a half. I'm writing it now, so it's so that'll be very helpful as well. Mm-hmm. And so Holy Land was my first pilgrimage that I led. I lived there for about a year during my biblical studies, and then I started bringing people there. You know, it just such a thrill to be able to bring people to these places and show them, as St. Jerome in the early centuries said, to show them, to allow them to touch the places that they read about in the Scriptures.
Right.
And that's the connection. The Holy Land has sometimes been called the fifth gospel. And so we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then the places we can see and touch and experience of Christ's life is the experience of pilgrimage in the Holy Land. Right. So we usually start in Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee, spend some time on the water, all around the towns that which were the primary places that Jesus spent his ministry in. And then we travel downward, down through, usually through Samaria. We stop at the Samaritan well.
Wow.
And then we go into Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and go down to Jericho, down to the desert, the Dead Sea. And there's just so many places, but they're all biblical sites. Mm-hmm. And when we go there, we read the passage, we reflect on the passage there, we renew our baptismal promises with sprinkling of Jordan water, we renew our marriage vows at Cana, we renew our, we celebrate the passion at Calvary, we celebrate the resurrection at the empty tomb of the Lord. So, it's just so much to experience a Holy Land trip. The Holy Land is the number one, the original Christian pilgrimage.
Right.
And,
You got me with goosebumps.
Yeah. I loved it. I've been there a couple dozen times, bringing groups. But every time I go, I have to say, Jody, it's really, mm-hmm. it excites me to touch those places again. Right. Myself, but especially to be there with a new group of people to show them and help them through that experience to get the most out of it that they can.
That is just phenomenal. I know that part of Ignatian's spirituality is to meditate through the Scriptures. That's right. And if you've been there, it's so much easier. Mm-hmm. But even if you haven't, you can then create it in your mind, and then when you go, you got something to compare it to, which is really interesting. And if you look at your Bible, there are usually pictures that you can, some of the Bibles.
Yeah, that whole tradition that St. Ignatius gave us of the spiritual exercises, that's all about meditating on the Scriptures. And that's easiest to do in the gospel passages where Jesus is in the land, healing, multiplying, dining, miracles, all of those wonderful events. We can picture them in our minds. That's Ignatian. Think about all of our senses. Think about being there, putting ourselves in the place of the characters, relating with Christ. So pilgrimage is not, we don't have to go to another place. We don't have to go to the Holy Land or some other place to experience the grace of pilgrimage. I love what Pope Francis did for the year of Jubilee. He said, he retained the importance of pilgrimage as an aspect of the Jubilee year, but he said, you bishops establish holy doors and sacred places in every diocese. So we can
Right.
obtain the grace of pilgrimage by going through the holy door in whatever place the diocese has designated. So that's a way of pilgrimage
Right.
as well.
Right.
And everybody can do that.
Yeah.
And there are local pilgrimages as well. Those of us who live in southern Louisiana, you know, we are blessed with so many places. Down in New Orleans, there's so many sites of the saints and the Catholic tradition there. Pilgrimage is easy for us to do. There's the whole idea of what they do down in New Orleans. Well, we do it here in Baton Rouge as well. The Good Friday walk.
Right. Yes.
You know,
absolutely.
that's a form of the sign of the Way of the Cross, but two specific sites in our diocese downtown. In New Orleans, the parishes are close enough together where you can do a church walk
Yes.
during Lent. And so all of those are pilgrimage experiences. You know, there's something about pilgrimage that's in our very being as human beings. You know, I think God made us to be pilgrim people. I mean, even in his creation, you know, there's like there's the salmon, you know, that every year they rigorously swim upstream to the place of their birth to spawn and to give new life.
Right.
You know, and then there's those monarch butterflies who travel thousands and thousands of miles, and then they swarm down to Mexico because that's where they were born, and they give new life. They lay their eggs, and the caterpillars are hatched, and new life begins. You know, there's something about pilgrimage, and all throughout human history, we people have been on pilgrimage. There's pilgrimage sites not just for Christians, but for every imaginable spiritual tradition in the history of humanity.
That is awesome.
We've just kind of perfected it as Christians, you might say.
Amen.
You know, I mean, for us, pilgrimage is a part of our very being because we are from the tradition of Israel.
Right.
3 times a year, they were required to go up to Jerusalem on pilgrimage, right?
Right.
The Feast of Passover, Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Tabernacles. Those are pilgrimage feasts, and they prayed the pilgrimage psalms as they traveled. And that was the tradition of Jesus, and that whole rich tradition then came into our Christian faith as well.
So give them your website one more time so they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, you can Google my name, Stephen Binz.
With PH.
Or with a PH, thank you. And you can go to my website, which is bridge-b.com. Bridge-b.com, which simply stands for Bridge Building Opportunities.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great to talk about pilgrimage, and we're glad that you were with us today, and we hope you enjoyed this opportunity to kind of feel the impact of pilgrimage. And thank you again for being here.